Today, we're going to dive into a really powerful story from the autobiography of a man who would become a U.S. Supreme Court Justice, William O. Douglas. But this isn't about law. It's a raw, first-person account of a childhood trauma, a near drowning, and the incredible, lifelong journey he took to conquer the fear it created. I mean, that quote right there gets right to the heart of it. This isn't just about being a little spooked in the water. This is about a primal terror, something so deep it's beyond understanding, a complete loss of control that just hijacks your entire being. So you might be wondering, where did a fear this intense come from? You'd think it started with the big near-drowning incident, but nope. The seeds for this terror were actually planted years and years earlier. So picture this. He's just a little kid, maybe 3 or 4 years old, at a beach in California. A wave comes, knocks him flat, and just buries him in water. He can't breathe. And his dad? His dad just laughs it off. But for that little boy, it was pure terror. And that feeling, it stuck with him. So years later, when he shows up at the YMCA pool to learn to swim, that old fear was already there, just waiting under the surface. And you know, the real irony here is that the pool was supposed to be the safe choice. His mom was constantly warning him about the local Yakima River, telling him all these stories about people who drowned. So the YMCA pool was meant to be this haven, this perfectly safe place to learn. But, as you can probably guess, this safe space would soon become the setting for what he later called, pretty calmly, the misadventure. A single moment that would go on to change his entire life. So there he is, just waiting by the side of the pool, nobody else around. And in walks this big 18-year-old kid, a real bruiser, he calls him. With this one casual, cruel question, the kid just picks him up and heaves him into the deep end. No warning, no reason, just a completely thoughtless, aggressive act. Now, here's what's so amazing. Even as he's sinking, his brain is still working. He wasn't immediately hysterical. Yeah, he was scared, but he wasn't, as he puts it, frightened out of my wits. He actually came up with his very logical, rational plan to save himself. But fear has a funny way of twisting reality, doesn't it? The pool was 9 feet deep. That's it. But to him, sinking, with his lungs about to explode, it felt like 90 feet. That long, slow drop to the bottom felt like an eternity, and his very rational plan was already starting to fall apart. So his big plan to pop up like a cork? It failed. He came up so slowly. And when he finally managed to open his eyes, he wasn't greeted by the air and the light of the surface. He was met with this terrifying, murky, yellow underwater world. That's when the real panic started to kick in. And at this point, that stark terror just completely took over his body. He tried to scream, tried to kick, but nothing worked. His legs were just dead weights, paralyzed. He wasn't in control anymore. Some invisible force, the panic, the water, it was just pulling him down. He tried to get to the surface a third time, but he couldn't make it. And then all the effort just stopped. He describes this strange, peaceful feeling washing over him as he blacked out, a quiet surrender. In his mind, that was it. He was dying. The curtain of life was falling. Now, obviously, he was rescued. The bully's excuse was that he was only fooling. But surviving the incident wasn't the end of the story. In so many ways, it was just the beginning of a long psychological haunting. The long-term damage was just severe. This trauma became what he called a handicap. For years after, anytime he was even near water, this icy horror would grip him. It completely ruined any joy he might have had from fishing trips, from boating, from just having fun. The fear literally followed him everywhere. So after years of being a prisoner to this fear, he finally just decided enough is enough. He was going to fight back. And this is the real turning point in the story, where he begins this slow, methodical process of, well, building a swimmer from scratch. And this really shows you don't overcome a fear this deep with one big, brave moment. It's about slow, painstaking, repetitive work. His instructor literally deconstructed swimming, piece by piece. For 3 months, it was just being pulled across the pool on a rope. Then, hundreds of times, just putting his face in the water and breathing. Then, for weeks, just kicking at the side of the pool. Only then, after all that, did they put all the pieces together. Okay, so now he could physically swim. The instructor's job was done. But his job, it was far from over. The final and most important battle was still ahead.
and this was one he had to fight all alone, inside his own mind.
This was a solo mission now. An instructor could teach him the mechanics, but nobody else could get inside his head and prove to him that the fear was really gone. He had to be the one to go back into the water, alone, and face down whatever was left of that terror.
This is just an incredible moment. He's swimming by himself, and he feels a little flicker of that old panic. But instead of shrinking from it, he confronts it head on. He gives it a name, Mr. Terror, and he talks to it, he taunts it. By personifying his fear, he takes all the power back. He turns it from this huge, overwhelming force into something he can actually face.
And he didn't just face his fear once. He went on a campaign to absolutely destroy it. He started in that same YMCA pool. Then he leveled up, swimming 2 miles across a huge lake. And finally, to kill off any last residual doubts, he went way up into the Cascade Mountains to swim in the high lakes, just to prove, once and for all, that he was the one in control.
And through this entire journey, he came to this really profound understanding. He learned that in the actual moment of dying, there was peace. The real horror, the real enemy wasn't death, it was the fear of death. And because he had experienced both of those things, his will to actually live became stronger than ever.
This personal discovery of his probably sounded pretty familiar. His friend, President Franklin D. Roosevelt, had famously said this, right? But for Douglas, this wasn't just a nice quote anymore. He had lived it in the most real and terrifying way you can imagine. And here it is. This is the ultimate prize for that whole struggle. It was never just about being able to swim. It was about achieving total freedom. By conquering this one massive fear, he felt released to live his life to the fullest, to climb mountains, and to just brush aside any fear that got in his way. Douglas's story really shows us that our fears, no matter how real and powerful they feel, can be confronted. They can be overcome, piece by piece. So it really makes you think, doesn't it? What's your deep water? What fear, big or small, is holding you back from being truly free?